Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a super useful feature in modern JavaScript, arrow functions. They have shorter syntax, fewer bugs with this, and they're perfect for cleaner code. And we're going to understand that today and understand the difference between an arrow function and, traditional functions you might be writing. So first I want to mention that arrow functions aren't just a shortcut. They behave differently from regular functions in a lot of surprising ways, which we'll get into. And by the end of this video, you'll understand not only how to use arrow functions, but also when not to. So first, let's touch on what exactly is an arrow function and the difference between a traditional function. An arrow function is essentially a newer, cleaner way to write functions in JavaScript introduced in ES6. And we'll see that here. We have a traditional function with the function keyword followed by a name, parentheses, curly braces. And then we have an arrow function, which is assigned to a variable. It's wrapped also in parentheses. And then you have, instead of the function keyword, we're using the equal sign and greater than sign to make an arrow followed by curly braces. It gets you the same result, so it's still going to get hello plus name if we were to run this, but the arrow function is just, shorter and neater in a lot of ways, so it's great for both beginners and for people more advanced in JavaScript. Arrow functions are very flexible, and we'll see that here. You can write it a lot of different ways, especially for one-liners. So if you, let's say, only are using one parameter, you can just include that parameter like we're doing here without parentheses. If you have multiple parameters, you'll need parentheses. And if you have no parameters, you'll also need those parentheses as well to complete the structure of an arrow function. And then if it's a one-liner, you can omit the curly braces from the code, as you can see in these three examples. A one-liner also gives an implicit return as well, and that value will be returned automatically. So we've talked a little bit about arrow functions, but why exactly would we use them? We understand that it's clean and often, more concise, but why exactly what's the other benefits to this? So arrow functions, like I mentioned, have shorter syntax. It's, more predictable with this, which we're going to talk about right now. And it often is cleaner code for smaller jobs, such as, running small tasks such as, callbacks, event handlers, array methods such as, map or filter. There's a lot of, usefulness to arrow functions. So first, to really understand the arrow function or the core concept is, understanding about this and what exactly this means. So first, let's tackle this. And this refers to the object that's calling the function. And here we have an example. This .name in this example refers to person.name, Alex here, because the function here is called by the person object. And if we were to run this in our code here, if we were to run this, you will see, hi, I'm Alex. Now this changes if we were to add a setTimeout. And you'll see that again if we run the exact same thing, but this time with setTimeout, we're going to get back undefined after 1 second. And the reason for that, or approximately 1 second, and the reason for that is because setTimeout is a part of the window of the browser or node in this case. And we talked about how it's a built-in function. It's one of those bonus features that we get when we're running JavaScript in the browser or node. And in that case, because setTimeout is calling function is all of a sudden going to refer to that window or node, and that's why we get undefined versus person. So when we're using regular functions, it's referring then all of a sudden to the global object, not the person. And to fix this, we can go ahead instead use arrow functions. And if we were to run an arrow function instead, we're using the arrow here, we get back Alex. As we can see, arrow functions don't create their own this. They inherit it from the surrounding code. Arrow functions just essentially say, look around me, just use whatever this arguments or, super that already exists in the place that I was written. And to go a bit more into that is you want to think of arrow functions as more of like a Robin type of character and regular functions as more of a type of Batman character. And I think that's the best analogy I can think of when I was prepping this is it's kind of like Batman and Robin. Batman has a lot of benefits and bonus robustness to him about his, capabilities, whereas, Robin has a little bit less, and, there's some advantages to that just to make it a bit more cleaner and useful for its purpose. Robin has a purpose, and then Batman has a purpose as well. And so not all the time you need that robustness like a Batman, as, instead you could just use something like Robin. Now, there are limitations to arrow functions, and I want to get into that, and this kind of touches on this Batman-Robin analogy that we're talking about. And the first thing is, really it's this core concepts here. So the difference between arrow functions and regular functions are these four things, or, the four main things. So you have new here. So regular functions get the ability to create new objects or new instances, and arrow functions don't get this. Arrow functions also don't get this like a regular function does. This is a keyword referring to a current execution context or object. You have super, that's found in a regular function but not found in arrow functions. Super is that keyword used to call methods or constructors from a parent class. And then, like I mentioned, arguments. The regular functions have an arguments object, and that arrow function doesn't have that same type of thing. And we're going to talk about ways to work around that. But these are the four things that regular functions get as a Batman, and arrow functions don't. And so we will see here, if we were to run this in the console, we're going to get back a type error. So this is the first example here of it's trying to be a constructor, and we'll see type error person is not a constructor. We're using an arrow function, and it doesn't work because it doesn't exist. It doesn't have that capability like a regular function does. And so we're starting to see some of the limitations of arrow functions. And the next thing we can discuss too is how arrow functions don't have that argument object like I mentioned. And we will see that here we have, even though it doesn't have an arguments object, this still runs, and we can see that. So if we run sandbox 7, we'll get back Matt. So that still works. And we will see, it still can accept arguments, but it doesn't have arguments object. And we want to understand that a bit more. So here we have an arrow function. We are trying to access arguments. And what's going to happen is you'll get a reference error if you run this in the browser. And I've gone ahead and done this for you. I ran this in the console, and we get a reference error because it doesn't exist. And that's, again, a limitation of arrow functions done intentionally. This is essentially just a helper. So you have your normal function. Arrow functions are just that helper that you want to, use from time to time. And to get around that, so it doesn't have an arguments object. An arguments object allows you to access all of the arguments that are being used. And, to get around that, and often, a bit more recommended, is to just go ahead and use the REST operator. And this is often, a more modern recommended way to handle variable arguments anyway. So it also, it works great with arrow functions. So it's just, better just to use this instead of trying to access the arguments object to begin with. And so we'll see that here, that we get back the number 6. And so essentially, to kind of dive in or recap this idea of Batman and Robin, you want to think of it like this. So regular functions with the function keyword are like Batman. It's fully loaded with tools like this, arguments, super and new, which we talked about. It can do big jobs like being a constructor. Now, arrow functions are more like Robin. They're lightweight and quick. They don't have heavy tools. They're a great sidekick for simple tasks. New is an operator used to create, instances of that constructor. This is a keyword referring to the current execution context or object. Super is a keyword used to call methods or constructors from a parent class. And arguments is an object available inside non-arrow functions that contains all past arguments. All of those 4 items aren't available in arrow functions, but it still, serves as a great, lightweight and quick tool you can use from time to time when you need to. So, essentially use arrow functions for small, simple things, but when you need that full power and robustness, go with the function keyword, the Batman, you can say. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope arrow functions are now a lot clearer now for you. And if you learned something, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more beginner-friendly JavaScript videos every week.